Thank you for joining us. I'm Christina Fox, the CEO of Tech Alliance. As the Regional Innovation Center for Southwestern Ontario, Tech Alliance is committed to people who have big hopes, big dreams, and see big opportunities. We are the place for dreamers, innovators, and world-changing ideas. And we're focused on building a globally competitive innovation economy that enables entrepreneurship, spurs accelerated growth, attracts ambitious talent and new companies, and we do this with you in mind. So before we get started, let me share a few key points. Everyone on this call is muted, and please feel free to add any questions that you would like to ask Jonathan in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Today's masterclass will be recorded and available for you after the call. So let's get started. Nothing we once thought about the future of work and business could have prepared us for the kind of rapid, relentless change that our innovation economy has experienced in recent history. Is the current rush to digitize organizations resulting in accelerated transformation, or the abrupt start of something bigger? Before diagrams and wireframes, personas and journey maps, and well before usability testing, the missing step is an answer to the correct question: how do customers adapt? Today, we'll discover new innovations to challenges you might not have known existed, as Jonathan Kochis drives us through UX methods and processes necessary to understand the design for your customers. Instead of moving quickly to design solutions, we'll learn how to step back, understand the situation, and find seeds of better possibilities. I'm really geeking out here because I absolutely love this stuff. Thank you, Jonathan, for leading this masterclass. So Jonathan is an NNG certified UX researcher and product designer with over 15 years experience in design strategy and product development, both as an individual designer and researcher and as a team lead. As the founder of ResIam, Jonathan has directed the growth and transformation of the company while facilitating workshops, conducting generative and evaluative UX research, designing digital products, and helping teams identify opportunities to improve their internal approach to digital product innovation and design. Truly a master in his craft and one of London's most coveted leaders, Jonathan has worked as an external consultant and an embedded designer on development teams delivering web and mobile products. His experience ranges from helping pre-product startups to get off the ground to advising Fortune 500 companies through design strategy, product strategy, and usability testing. Now that's a really long introduction, but worth every single character. Some of you on this webcast already know Jonathan, and some of you are in for a truly wild ride. Truth be told, we have a common belief between our board, our staff, our entrepreneurs and residents, and the entire technology and community, including you, that in pursuit of creating spaces where innovation thrives, we are focused on amplifying leaders in technology, and we are thrilled to have Jonathan here to share industry tips and best practices when it comes to the user experience. Now over to you, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Christina. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I've learned over the last 15 years of helping businesses understand their customers and make design decisions and product decisions and service decisions based on that. So suddenly and abruptly, digitization is playing an outsized role in determining which businesses survive and which businesses thrive. Things that have happened in the last number of months, the global health crisis, has really put a focus on how important it is to be able to adapt and how important it is to be able to change quickly. And not necessarily just change from moving from technology to technology or becoming more digitized, but understanding how to do that in a way that focuses on the people that you're trying to solve problems for, the people that you're trying to serve. If we look back to March, a number of things happened. It's a crazy time for business, and it still is. Speaking personally, we had projects that we thought were going to happen that were suddenly stopped, and there were a lot of questions, a lot of thinking and looking around and deciding on how to move forward. And many businesses face that, but to a much greater extreme. If you think of businesses where physical service delivery was their primary method, those came to an abrupt halt, just a cold stop. Other businesses who may have been already partially transforming, if you will, or moving into using more technology like a a retailer who was formerly doing physical retail but could move to e-commerce. That jump is a technical jump, a technological jump, more tactical than anything, but something that could happen relatively quickly. The businesses who are thriving now are the ones who already had practices in place where they could, through an understanding of the customer, adapt and change and innovate quickly because they knew how, because they already were customer-centric. And so that's what I'm hoping to get to as part of our conversation today, is an understanding that being customer-centric isn't something that you write in your mission, isn't something that you write in your vision. It's not in your vision statement or included in your values, or it isn't about great customer service. It could include all of those things, but it's a real core approach and a shift in mindset that allows a business. It seems like it's something that takes longer. I hear that all the time. Like, well, we don't have time to do all of that research work. We don't have time to talk to our customers. We just don't have time. It's going to cost too much. But it's a practice and an investment in understanding your people and how to experiment with them quickly and understanding them quickly so that you can innovate and continue to provide value. And that's where I'd like us to get to, or at least have an understanding of what that means, how to go about that, and to frame that a little bit to make sure that everybody's kind of, we're all on the same page, if you will, is that this is a talk about UX and user experience. So it's largely digital products and services that here, and the approaches to being customer-centric so that the decisions made about those things are coming from a customer understanding. Digital transformation is so much bigger than that. It dictates how a business operates. There's so much more than the customer-facing digital things that it makes. And so I think it's important to understand that, and that we're kind of level set there. So the journey to success in anything looks like this, or some variation of it. You've probably seen slides like this a number of times. Especially when it comes to understanding customers, because there's no linear path, because there's no right way, and because your customers change like this too. You cannot have a linear understanding of your customer, because your customer is not linear. Because there are probably a number of them, a number of different groups of people, and inside those groups there are so many different individuals and variations, and they change over time, which is critical. It's important to know, especially now, not only what you understand about your customer from months ago or years ago, but what's happening now. How has this change affected your customers now? And so it's likely to look something like this, and that's totally okay. And so is the journey to understanding. Stops and starts and back and forth, success and failure are all part of it. And that mantra needs to exist for any of this to work. So today, we'll talk about what it means to be customer-centric. It isn't just, we are relentlessly focused on customer service, and it's in our mission, and it's in our vision, and it's a value that we hold dear. Those are things that are written on a website, right? They don't necessarily mean that you're actually living those things, unfortunately. And so it's important to have a good understanding of what that means, what it means to be customer-centric in practice. What can go wrong if we're not? This isn't here as a means to scare anybody. This is more of a reality check. So there are costs to not being customer-centric. And one of the unfortunate things is sometimes that's not realized because of blind spots, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you may have an opportunity that exists that you just didn't uncover, that could have resulted in some measure of success. So how do we get there? This is really the important part, to understand with a good understanding of what it means to be customer-centric, and then here's the things that can go wrong if we're not. But then how do we get there? I'd like some real tips on what should we be doing so that we can avoid the things that might go wrong and capitalize on what could go right now that we have a good understanding. And what should we watch out for along the way? I've had the privilege of being involved in many different organizations at many different stages, doing many different digital things. And I've seen A lot of things to watch out for. It's just the nature of the kind of work that I have the opportunity to do. And there's some important things to look out for. And so we'll finish off with that. There'll be time for question and answer. I'm watching the clock as carefully as I can. And I want to make sure that we've got 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So we'll leave that for the end. Take a bit of a breath here, have a look at what we'll be covering, and then we'll get into things. So just what does it mean to be customer-centric? If we're putting the customer at the center of what we do, what does that mean? How can we explain that, or how can we understand that? The simplest way, at least that I've encountered, and I don't know everything by any stretch, but I've experienced a lot. And to me, the clearest way to understand being customer-centric is that you think from an outside-in perspective. Outside in, meaning the customers are on the outside and the organization is what's inside. If you look at that, the illustration on the left, inside the dashed circle is the ideas and the innovation and the things that the organization is doing. Those are being informed by the green arrows, which are an understanding of the customer. That represents what we know about the customer. If we compare that to the diagram that's on the right-hand side, we see a product-centric approach. And you could interchange the word product with technology. You could interchange it with marketing and sales. You could interchange it with almost anything that happens inside, any department or any kind of work that happens inside and is pushed out to the customer. So we'll think about the ideas in here. That's our job. We'll brainstorm, and then out that goes in some form or another. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different way of thinking about things to pause and say, what do we know about our customer? And I have some more on that on the next slide. The important distinction to make here, probably among many, is that those green arrows that are coming in from the customer's perspective that represent the understanding of the customer, they don't represent ideas from the customer. I think that's one of the most important things to remember, is that it's not, being customer-centric doesn't mean that it's the customer's job to tell us what to do, or that we are out there looking for concrete ideas that a customer has said, and we'll build those or design those or whatever, and that makes us customer-centric. It's easy to get those conflated because that sounds like we're listening to the customer, we're doing exactly what they ask, that makes us customer-centric. But it's not the customer's job to come up with ideas. That's what happens inside with understanding and information from the customer. Looking at that a different way, everything a business does starts with an objective of some kind. Either moving some metric up, moving another metric down, any combination of those. But every action a business takes, especially every action as it relates to the making of digital products and services, comes from a business objective. The business has said, we need to do this, we need to achieve this. In a customer-centric organization or an outside-in point of view, the first thing that's asked when that happens is, what do we know about our customers that can align with what we're trying to achieve? And then we'll think about ideas. Or is there anything that we don't know? Is there anything that maybe is outdated or we think has maybe changed? And then along the way, we need to be open to the things that we don't even know we don't know. The blind spots, those are really critical, which is a very different way of thinking about it when you're product-centric or marketing-centric or sales-centric or technology-centric, anything inside out. The first thing that is said in response to a business objective is often, what features can we add? What product can we build that we don't have right now? How can we change our offering? How can we change our positioning? How can we sell this differently? What can we say that's different? All of those things happen inside and then ultimately go out, which is very different, as you can by now probably understand, from an outside-in perspective. And that's not to say that ultimately the customer-centric, what do we know about our customers? Here's an idea. What features can we add? That ultimately happens, right? The things that are on the right-hand side of that screen ultimately happen, but they don't happen first. That's the key, is that the response to the business objective in a customer-centric organization is, what do we know about our customer? Or what do we not know? Or how are we open to our blind spots? And then pairing that up with what we can do. It becomes dangerous to look at, and dangerous is maybe an exaggeration of that, but it could be risky to look at digital transformation as an adoption of technology, thinking from an inside-out point of view. If we're faced with a business objective and we say, well, we need to be digital about this, what can we do with artificial intelligence? You're not thinking about what is happening with the customer. Does artificial intelligence, or does machine learning, or does augmented reality or virtual reality or e-commerce or something mobile, does that actually help us based on what we know about our customer? It might. There's a chance that it might, but you might not know how to use that properly, or might be adopting technology and thinking we're transforming that way, but still not having that solid understanding of the customer. So that's a watch out that we'll discuss a little bit more later, but something certainly to pay attention to. So with this as kind of an understanding, we can start to build and move into what happens if we're not customer-centric. The short answer to that is lots. And I've got a couple of examples. One is a project that I was involved in, that I was leading from a research perspective, and we uncovered, I would call it a massive gap or a massive leak in revenue because of making design decisions that were based on technology, or at the very least not considering who was supposed to be using the design. And the other is one that I was not involved in, but everybody here will probably be familiar at least with the brand and the product. So we'll get into that one first. In June of 2017, almost 3 years ago, Microsoft launched a redesigned version of Skype. This was somewhere around 6 years, I think, after Microsoft had acquired Skype. There weren't a ton of changes up until this point. And then there was a big change, a massive change. And you're forgiven if you don't recognize what's on the screen there. If you look at that and say, well, that's not Skype, that's okay. Because you probably didn't see that. Many did not see that, or at least maybe have forgotten it. This was touted as the next generation of Skype, as this big radical change that was going to set the product on course for success for many years to come. It's so much of it was redesigned. I mean, the calling feature was even redesigned, which is a really important thing. Obviously, it's Skype. Things like highlights and capture, those were the Snapchat-like features that were added to this. So you could create stories like you can in Snapchat or like Instagram and Facebook now. You could capture video through long press or photos. You could add stickers and emoji and all that, much like you can in all those other products I just mentioned. But that's inside of Skype. Those features were built inside of something that was for messaging, that was for calls. And you can start to see where this might be a bit of a misstep or something that feels like outside in. It's looking, even though it's looking at another product. So it sounds like it's looking outside, like saying, what's Snapchat doing? That's looking outside. But it's not looking outside at the right things. And then it's saying, what can we do internally? What can we build? What can we design? What can we make? What can we release? What features can we launch that we don't have now? And when you frame it that way, it's a very strange decision. And what's bound to happen with a mindset like this is a change in headline. A change in headline that's about 6 weeks later or after the first one from the same publication. Everyone seems to hate the new Skype. So that didn't take long, right? 6 weeks of feedback. I believe it was an Android first release and then iOS. So everyone seems to hate the new Skype. And it wasn't just headlines. It wasn't just a big headline like this that's categorizing everybody's the same and they're hating Skype. A good indication of how a mobile app is perceived and or used is to look at the ratings and the reviews. It's something that we do when we're doing looking at redesigning a product that exists already, is to look for tidbits and information in App Store feedback and comments. The ratings themselves, they're a little bit difficult. What's 2 stars versus 3? That's kind of hard, but you can look through some of the content there and find some really insightful information. And so the App Store ratings themselves, there's a number to pay attention to at the very least. They dropped down to 1 star in the, or pardon me, 1 star in the UK, and from 3.5 to 1.5 in the US App Store. So pretty significant drop for a product. Can you imagine Microsoft having a flagship product like Skype at a 1 star or 1.5 star rating? That's not ideal at all, especially as part of a relaunch, a radical futuristic kind of redesign that was supposed to carry the product for a number of years. And then there was comments from Reddit as well. Some of them I'm just going to read here. It's absolute garbage now. We use Skype at a large organization. The classic version had its issues, but since this update, everyone in the organization hates it. And I want to key in on one sentence in that comment, and that is the classic version. Pardon me, the classic version had its issues, and we'll come back to that in a sec. So then what happens is Skype rolls back its redesign by ditching stories, squiggles, and over-the-top color. So that took, that's September of 2018. You're looking at a year and a couple of months to get rid of all of that. So going from the redesign is a radical change, it looks like Snapchat, to everybody hates it, to Skype rolls back its redesign and ditched all of that stuff. So all of those things that were created from an outside or an inside out, pardon me, perspective had all been for naught. And not just for naught, but what did they do to the reputation of the product? What did they do? How much time was there in there for users to find and adopt something else, and not just stick with Skype and not use it because it wasn't good, but find another solution, and then maybe not come back to Skype. And that's not to mention, I don't have figures on this stuff obviously, but to think about how much that would have cost in terms of design and development and product management and marketing and infrastructure and all of these things that would have had to have happened to support not only going through that change, but to support it while it was a live product for over a year. There's an incredible amount of money wasted there because they didn't look at that one little comment from that Reddit, one little phrase from that Reddit comment, which is the original version or the classic version had its issues. It makes sense to think, well, if we really want to make this product better, they've got to be aware that there are issues. It's not coming from that one comment. And so let's look at what's happening. What do we know about our customers? And in this case, what do we know about them as it relates to how they're using our product? And maybe how they're using other products. That would be insightful as well. But think about what the vision is for Skype as a product, what we know about it, what's not working, and continue to move in that direction instead of this radical product-focused change that costs a ton of money. So that's one example. There's also this example that I discovered. So, hey, there's a lot of numbers on the screen. I promise you they'll make sense in just a minute. So this product was an intranet for a large organization. I was tasked with doing the UX research to understand how it should be, basically. We have an intranet, but we don't know what it's for or where it's not great, but we know it's not great. Help us understand what that is and where we go from here. And as part of that, I was doing observation. So I would sit with employees and I would watch them go about their daily tasks and how and when they started to interact with the intranet for something. So they'd use all this other software, and then every once in a while they'd go to the intranet, and I was really keen on understanding where that was in their kind of daily task flow or their daily journey. And one of those sessions, I observed somebody looking for a piece of content for about 15 minutes, and I sat there, and I'm not there to offer any assistance, and I can ask some questions, but I really wanted to see what that process was like. And through further conversations and research, understanding that was a common thing. and then to start to put some numbers behind that, because it's important to understand and to be able to quantify this kind of work. It was determined that there was about an hour a week spent looking for content using the intranet. And that's, that's unsuccessful usually, so it's probably a lot more than that. I multiplied that by the number of employees, but only a third of the workforce. I was very conservative in this estimation, and that they work 48, there's 48 working weeks a year. So that results in around 14,000 hours spent looking for content. And that's on the low end. This is very conservative. Then to put some numbers around that, if the average carrying cost is $100 an hour, that's salary, benefits, everything else. And that's from the organization themselves. That's a lot of money, $1.4 million a year spent looking for things on the intranet, because when it was designed or redesigned, it was not done with an understanding of who is using this, what are they trying to do, what does it need to be really good at. It was done from we're going to adopt this new technology for it and continually migrate things over there, and hopefully that works out. So it was very technology driven, not user driven at all, and it had quite a large cost, and that's only a conservative estimate, and one thing, the finding of content. And so you can see where they may have never known about this, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So these things do cost money. They cost money in opportunity, they cost money in lost productivity. So being customer-centric, although it seems like there's an extra cost, there was an extra cost for us to do this kind of research. It's not free. It's not $1.4 million, even close. So that investment is well worth looking for these kinds of things and making the necessary corrections. So there's the case for it. And how do we get there? What are the steps that we need to take in order to actually be customer-centric in the UX work that we're doing, in the product design and the service design? How do we do it? So there's two things that have to happen first, and these are at a much higher level than anything that's tactical or any kind of UX methodology or customer research methodology. And the first one is that leadership must be open to being wrong and okay with not knowing everything. If leadership is in a position where maybe a very directive position, or especially, and I've experienced this before, if leadership in the organization has come from a place where they were once the customer, and then they shift into the product or service provider, they tend to carry that mindset with them. Like, I used to be the customer, and so I understand the problems, we're going to design this, that's the end. So it won't work. None of this will work if leadership has that mentality, if they're not open to being wrong or okay with not knowing everything. And then teams must have a clear understanding of what the business is trying to achieve. So leadership, again, has to be very clear with those responsible for making the things that this is what we're trying to achieve. Quick break. Those two things have a lot to do with trust. Trust is another presentation. Trust is a very big thing. Trust is incredibly important, especially now with a shift to remote work. And I think organizations that don't have that built in will really feel it. And organizations that want to be customer-centric but don't have these two things and don't have trust from leadership will be doing what's essentially UX theater or customer-centric theater. It's for show. It doesn't matter. It looks good. It might make the company look good. It might initially make members of the team feel good about the work, but it doesn't have any long-standing or far-reaching effect, unfortunately. So those two things have to happen. And when they do, or when they start to, then we can get into what has to happen from a methodology perspective. If we look at the illustration on the screen here, along the left, we have our concepts moving, or our design moving, or ideas moving from things that are really abstract and fuzzy and unknown to things that are concrete, really well formed, really well shaped, really well understood, tangible maybe almost. And then across the bottom, we move from product or problem focused, to solution focused. And the best that we can hope for in all of this, if there isn't any real customer-centric stuff happening, and if we're operating in that kind of concrete solution focused, we're going to build these things and hopefully people will use them. The best that we can hope for is that there's some kind of a cycle where a product is designed or a feature is designed, it's built, it's released, there's feedback, and we go through that cycle where there's constant change based on what's known about what was designed. Best case scenario if we're only operating in this quadrant, if you will. But the problem with that, and this is roughly something called lean UX as a methodology, it's great. I suggest reading up on that because on its own, or its principles, I guess, are sound. The idea that you should constantly be releasing things and looking for feedback and adjusting based on that is wise and it's sound. The challenge with it, though, is when you place it in an illustration like this, is that it's very solution focused and it's very concrete. And in order to be customer centric, we can't be solution focused. We have to think about problems and understand those problems. Because what's happening in this yellow circle here is that you're only learning about what you've already designed. You're only learning if it works or how it works. You don't know why. You don't know if it's even solving a problem. You might know if it's usable. And so you can get trapped in there and continue to release things that are usable or easy to understand, but that's it. You don't know much about the people. You only know about how they're using what you've designed. So we need to roll that back, and you can probably understand how I'm going to try to move us over to the left as this illustration builds. Doesn't look like much right now, but we'll get there. So it would be great if we could define more about what we know about our customers. If we can say, this is what we know about our customers, let's start, making something for them. Let's start making some design change or releasing some features or something. Let's generate some ideas based on what we've defined and decided. Let's prototype those ideas and let's test and adjust those before we get into this lean UX cycle where we're actually releasing things. And when you do that, you wind up with something that's similar to a design sprint. And a design sprint is a methodology, and I believe there's a masterclass coming up on this, so certainly check that out through Tech Alliance. A design sprint is a truncated methodology that happens over a defined period of time where in the first day, and the second day, third day, fourth day, and fifth day, you do specific things, ultimately getting to test and adjust at the end where you're working through a prototype. It's great because it's closer to the left, right? You're thinking at least a little bit about, well, what do we know about our customers, and let's try some things before we produce them. So good, moving in the right direction. But there's a challenge with this. What happens if that first step there that says define and decide, what happens if what we unpack there, and what we share there is anecdotal or is stories within the organization, or is the way things used to be, or the way we think things are currently? What happens if you go through that and then you generate ideas based on that, and then you prototype based on that, and then you test and adjust based on that? Congratulations, you've made something that's usable, but if it's based on things that are not accurate or not up to date, especially now with how much things have changed, then you're testing and adjusting, again, something that is not based on what's actually happening, a true understanding. So the spirit of design sprints, or the concept of design sprints, the concept of lean UX, those are great because they're learning, they're rapid, they're changing, they're meant to move quickly, and I think that's good. But where we need to focus is learning more, and this is a term that's used often, empathy, or to empathize. And so that's where we have to be close to the people that we're designing for. We have to spend time learning about how things are for them, especially now. If you suspect that the clients or customers that you're serving have in any way experienced change because of COVID-19, or because of any big change, then you need to understand what that is, because you could uncover an entire new opportunity to solve problems for them, to move through design sprints, to move through lean UX, and to get to something valuable by starting with something that's really rooted in an understanding of people. And empathy is, there's a lot of ways to describe it. It's about being present without judgment. And in order to be present, you have to be just that. You have to be there, interviewing and working with and sharing ideas with the people who are expected to use and benefit from whatever it is you're making. Empathy does not come from data. Data is part of it, for sure. Data can maybe tell us about some trends or tell us where that something is potentially happening as an indicator, but it doesn't empathize on its own. It can't do that. And so we need to work with the people to have a better understanding of that. And that's where this empathy phase comes in. And that's where a methodology called design thinking is useful, in that it stresses that early phase of building empathy. And then, based on what we know, what we've learned, then let's define and decide and generate ideas and prototype and test and adjust, put that into some kind of lean process and figure out what's working and what's not in production, and then build on that quickly and iterate on that rapidly. But it's got to start over there on the left. And there are ways, the organizations that were able to really thrive through any kind of period of uncertainty or ambiguity or big change are the ones who can do those green things there quickly. The ones who have that practice built into their organization, so that when they are faced with change, they immediately say, we think something's changing. There's potentially an opportunity here to do a better job or add more value. We need to start with empathy, and then we'll move through this, and we can make a rapid change. Instead of a product focus approach or product centric, where we think something's changed or we have a business objective. Let's get in a room and brainstorm and we'll sort it out. That's not ideal. Who knows if that's going to work? And so it's about building this practice in. It's about understanding that things start with the customer, being customer centric, that allows an organization to change and adapt quickly. That's disruption. And disruption is not applying the latest technology. Disruption is figuring out what's going on with your customer so that you could apply technology that is going to make things better for them and ultimately disrupt or unseat others in your market. So what should we watch out for along the way? What are some of the things that I've seen that are kind of a watch out, or kind of a, just be careful about this sort of thing, or expect it to appear? The first one is sales-led design decisions that promise features to customers. So in the very early days of an organization, this is okay. Like, we're just getting started with our product. We know that our customers need this. We have to build it, but it doesn't scale at all. And as I mentioned earlier, being customer-centric isn't saying yes to the features requested by customers and just having those things pile on to the product. So sales-led is not ideal. Sales-informed is great, but be mindful of promising, a feature to a set of customers only to get their business, and then add that feature on. Who knows if they really need what they described? There's all kinds of things that can go wrong there. Validation as a stand-in for understanding. Validation is a part of the UX process that comes at the end, and it's to basically answer the question, how right were we? And you never want to start any kind of understanding with how right are we. So being mindful to not use things like usability testing or A/B testing or anything that's validating an existing solution as a stand-in for understanding the people who are using it. Again, you'll learn more about their interaction with what's already been designed than you will about them. It's important, but not as a stand-in for really understanding the customer and what they're going through, or how things are changing for them, or what it's like for them generally. Discovery without customer insight. A lot of projects start with some kind of discovery phase. If it doesn't have customer insight in it, if you're not interacting with customers in some way, be careful. And then, as I just mentioned on the previous slide, using methodologies like design sprints or design thinking without, and this is a difficult sentence, I should have worded it differently. It's important to understand how those things work. So from that perspective, understanding is right, but without a proper understanding of the customer. So starting from a foundation of something that's maybe too hypothetical or isn't grounded in anything that's actually come from customers or is maybe really dated. Those, you can generate false positives in the things that you design, and you can go on to design and release software that doesn't actually relate to or solve any problems. So be careful of that. Really pay attention to those early phases. And it's absolutely a go slow to go fast approach. The notion that you can go slow or that you should go slow to go fast is really, really important. It seems like at the very beginning, why are we interviewing these people? Why are we spending so much time working with our customers when we could be designing something, when we could be building something? And at the very beginning, that's what it feels like. Sometimes these discovery phases or these research phases or any of this early work that informs a decision, it can seem like it's taking time. But when we look at our objective, and our objective is to get to success as fast as possible, not to get to something that's built as fast as possible. Those two things are very different. Then taking the time to do it right will get you to success faster, even if it doesn't necessarily get you to something that's launched or released faster. So important to pay attention to that as kind of a general mindset as well. So I think we are at 3:44, 3:45. I am going to end things there, not just as a decision, but because that's actually the end of what I was hoping to cover. So the opportunity to express some of these ideas and these experiences that I've had, to give a little bit of advice. You can connect with me on Twitter, sign up for my newsletter, you can email me if you want. And I believe we now have some time for some Q&A.
We do. Amazing. So, Jonathan, there's a couple of really good questions that have come in. But I'm going to start with one that's more about you as a person and as a customer. Okay. So as a customer, which companies deliver your favorite or most positive experiences? Or what's maybe the most recent example where you were super delighted?
Super delighted.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I think because I use it on an ongoing basis, Slack is doing a good job of maybe not, I don't know what I know that they have a robust research practice. I've never been part of it, so I'm not sure how it works. But in terms of their releasing of features, I love the way they tell you what's new and they move you through the new features so that you're understanding what was added, why it was added, what's different for you, what's valuable for you as a user of the software. I quite like that. I think it helps. It makes me as a user feel like I'm part of the change, or that I'm at least aware of it. So that's quite positive. While I handle other questions, I will keep that in mind, because I feel like I should have a better answer for that. And there's something that's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite recall.
Yeah, I think you did a great answer. I would say the same for Slack, when the way that we use it within our own organization. To be honest with those on the call, we use Slack as sort of our backstage. So while we're on this call, we're troubleshooting if we need to, and we're using Slack for that purpose, in addition to the efficiencies it creates for teams all day, every day. So I think that's a great example. So then, using the Skype example that you shared with the audience, how do you tease out whether users, hate the new design, or because it truly is bad, or that they're just having to adapt to something new and different, and people are not, necessarily creatures desiring change. So how do you know that? You're the professional.
Yep, that's right. Give me back my old Facebook. That I've heard that before, and that was something that I'd meant to include in there. That there's always going to be some resistance to change. There'll be pockets of people for whom they just generally don't want change. There's a couple of things that have to happen there. People will appreciate the change if it makes the core of what they're supposed to be doing better. So if Skype in some way improved calling or messaging or communication, or maybe if Skype had started to move in the direction of a Slack before Slack was there, to add value to communication and collaboration, then the resistance to change is likely to be less. And it's a matter of understanding what does our product have to do really, really, really well? Like, what is the thing that we cannot, if we decide to touch it, we have to have really good rationale about how to improve it. We have to work with our users through these proposed changes. And then if that works out, we'll release something based on what we know. What Skype did wrong was, and again, I don't know the inner workings of that. I would assume that if they went through this kind of approach, they wouldn't have got to where they got. I mean, they could have ignored it. That's easy to do too, unfortunately. But they didn't focus on the core. And so when you move away from what you're supposed to do really well into these Snapchat features, for example, you're certain to really anger the group who needs it. You know, I need Skype for calling. That's what I use it for. Why are these highlights and filters and emoji and stories in the way of what I need to do? So pay attention to the top tasks, understand what you need to do really well, and then test it, and then be aware and listen to some of those pockets of concern, and know when to say, oh, this is happening a lot. I'm seeing more of this. Maybe it's something we should pay attention to.
I really liked how you addressed the concept of trust and extending trust. And then, later in the dialogue, you talked about empathy. And as you think of, design thinking and UX and propelling product design into market, I'm curious what advice you might give, or how you coach a team or a leader to better understand where their problems are. You had sort of said at the top of the call that it can be difficult to address or teach if a leader or the decision maker doesn't understand that there's a problem. What have been some ways that you have either teed people up to have the right conversations so that you're maybe not navigating that for them, or ways that you would coach, particularly if someone's sitting in an organization right now and they're thinking, there's this opportunity, but I'm going to have to coach somebody so they know that there's a problem.
Yeah, and that's a critical thing to know how to do, and it changes dramatically based on the kinds of personalities and the culture of the organization. So I'm not sure if this is the best idea, but I'll say it anyway. How's that for setting it up? If you're in an organization and mission and vision and values include a lot of customer focused things, but you want to know more about how that's actually, hitting the road, is to say, I have ideas on how we can really be true to our mission and our vision and our values. And here's one of those ways. And it could be something very small. And this applies even if the vision and values thing is not there. Is the idea of quick wins, starting really, really small to get that foothold, to do usability tests. I know it's validation, it's on something that's already built, but it's a quick way to get insight into how people use things, and it's probably the first or easiest step to involving customers in something that's already designed, so you're only learning about that, but it's feedback from them on something you've designed. And sometimes another piece that helps with that is the recordings of that, to move through a usability test with somebody, with a customer or with a client or whomever, and then to record that and to share clips of the audio, put a highlight reel together that shows people having trouble using something, and leadership might not have never ever been aware that was a challenge, and might become more open to the next step. Okay, well, this was really great. What else can we do? How can we prevent so that I don't have to hear somebody having trouble with this thing? Well, I have some more ideas on how to do that. And you build up on that and continue to take steps. But it starts with something small, something that's easy enough to kind of wrap somebody's head around, that doesn't cost a lot to do internally, especially. I've had success in organizations doing that and being part of them and saying, here's some things that I learned. Here's the recordings of that. I'd like to do more. I think we should. And that is usually quite difficult to ignore.
I really like the answer to your question, because the quick wins, I think, is the way to convert people who need to make decisions. And another question came in on the Q&A, really similar to the one that I just asked. And a part of me wants to put in a plug for you right now, and that is the opportunity. You've delivered this masterclass, and you've given some high level, and you've been able to share some of, where could the pitfalls be, or where could there be challenges. For those on the call, if this is something that you're looking at, if you're really trying to implement a customer-centric UX approach, maybe start with this video, because what you've laid out today, Jonathan, is quite top level. I consider you to be one of the foremost thought leaders in this space. And I feel really lucky that we had you on this call today, and that we continue to have this engagement with you. So to answer that question, that's partly what I would recommend is share the good work that Jonathan does. I'm going to maybe go with at least one more question.
Yeah, sure.
It's a bit of a chicken and the egg. So if you aren't getting direct feedback from customers on their experience, what's the best way to get started? So, and partly, how do you get feedback about what you've got to know if it's good, bad, or ugly? And then if you think that that's the case, then how do you get the feedback? Can you talk with us about that?
Yep. So I hate to answer these questions with it depends all the time, but it depends. So any business has customers of some variety. B2C, B2B, there's somebody somewhere who's deciding to buy the thing or pay for the thing or use a service or subscribe or whatever the conversion is. And so that person is almost always known, or you almost always have a way to connect with them, email them, maybe they're on a newsletter. If it's B2B, you've probably got a relationship with them. And so you can, or who to talk to in the organization to say, we want to talk to customers who buy this and use or could potentially use this thing that we're working on improving. Who do I talk to? Can you put me in touch with them? If it's B2C, let's say, and it's bigger, you could do recruitment through your social channels, through email marketing, through pop-ups on a website. There's all kinds of bigger, broader ways to do that, to get in touch and start to collect a pool of people to draw from. The linchpin in all of that, in my experience, the critical part is compensation for that time. We've run parallel projects where two usability testing projects at the same time or almost the same time, similar industries. One was compensating their test subjects, the other one was not. Participants, test subjects is a bad word, participants. When you say to somebody, an hour of your time is worth $100 to me, here's a $100 gift card, that means a lot, right? Then you're saying to the participant, not only is your feedback important, but the time you're taking to give it to me is important. And so here's this thing in return for that. We have tremendous success with that. One of the big challenges is people not showing up for the scheduled interview. And then you've set aside this time. You were hoping to talk to 15 people. Only 3 of them showed up. And in this case, we had these parallel projects. The one that wasn't compensating, people just don't show up. There's nothing, pardon me, there's nothing on the line for them. There's no hook. And they're not feeling like they're being compensated. So find who in the organization has the connection to the people, or use digital channels to connect with those people, offer compensation, add that into the budget, and then make sure to reward them and thank them for however they're participating, whether that's more of a qualitative interview or usability testing, prototype testing, whatever it is.
That's terrific. I mean, it's the cost of doing business. If you want to have the kind of insight that is going to drive performance and product development and user experience for a significant length of time, you should probably know up front. I think that's great advice. We're coming close to the hour, so I might just ask you to rapidly answer this last question, because I'd hate to leave it in the Q&A and just be left hanging there. With a customer-centric approach, can you share an example of a product or feature that was designed and how you make changes when you're partway through? That's a good one.
So I wonder if that's, so there's a couple different answers to that one too. Like if you're partway through the making of it and haven't released it, then it's much easier to change, right? Because nothing is live, and that's why it's important to test in shorter bits of time, shorter effort. Do a little bit of work and work with your customers on what you've done. That's something that we're doing right now. We had proposed some large changes to this particular piece of software based on research that we had done. And before we started moving into some heavier design work around what that change would be, we created really rough prototypes that demonstrated what we were thinking, and we wanted to get really early buy-in on, or not even buy-in. We wanted to understand from as early on as possible what that change, how would that change be interpreted? Were we on the right path? So it's okay to change things at any point in time, right? Any time is a good time. There's not a bad time to change stuff. There are better times, and the earlier is often better. And so that's why, as soon as you can think of a way to prototype what it is you're trying to change, then do that, and then continue to evolve that before you get too far. And then if you add more detail to it or change it slightly, then having another checkpoint for some constant involvement is a good idea. If it's already live, I mean, you might have some analytics data that suggests that something is not working. Then you need to do the interviews and usability testing, or usability interview combination, to understand why that thing is not working like you thought it would. And then if the change is straightforward enough, make the change. If it's not, if it requires something bigger, work with customers through a prototype of some variety. Again, all this stuff sounds like it takes time, right? As I'm saying it, I can hear that's going to take time. That's, there's extra time in that. And I know that, but that's time well spent when we look at getting to success as quickly as possible.
I totally agree. Time well spent. We've taken it right to the last minute. I want to offer my sincere thanks to you for leading this masterclass. It's a very exciting time to have a change up in topics, and the time you've spent today with us is invaluable. And for those of you who are joining us today, if you feel like you haven't had enough time with Jonathan, we invite you to join our UX peer-to-peer group tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And conveniently, the link to register for that has been dropped in the chat area. Jonathan, again, thank you for sharing tools, actions, thoughts about process, a bit of the flywheel and how to iterate, leading with trust, engaging in empathy. Those are all really strong tips, outside of the craft of UX, usability testing, and the areas that you have depth of expertise. And that's everything today, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody. Have an incredible day. Be well and take good care.